Carl Jung refused to answer one question his entire life. Do you believe in God? He would smile and say, I do not believe, I know. 3 weeks before his death, he finally explained what he meant in a private letter. He wrote, God is not a belief, it is a psychological fact. I have seen it in every dying patient I studied, and now I am about to meet it. This was not faith, this was observation. Jung spent decades analyzing people in their final days, watching their dreams change, documenting the symbols that appeared as death approached. And he found something, a pattern, a transformation, something that happens to everyone, whether they know it or not. What he discovered before he died changes everything. Let me show you. Before Carl Jung died, he made one final observation that contradicted everything modern psychology teaches. He said, "We do not have a soul, we are souls who happen to have bodies." This was not poetry, this was a conclusion. Based on decades of studying one specific pattern he found in every single person approaching death. And that pattern, that psychological shift, reveals something most people never discover until it is too late. Jung spent years working with terminally ill patients, not to comfort them, but to study them. He wanted to know what happens to the psyche when the body begins to fail. And what he found was shocking. As people got closer to death, their dreams changed completely. The ego, the part of us that worries about reputation, success, identity, began to fade from their dreams, and something else emerged. Symbols of wholeness, mandalas, circles, images of completion. Jung called this the self, the deeper, eternal part of consciousness that exists beyond the individual personality. And here is what terrified him. These symbols did not appear randomly, they appeared in a specific sequence, as if the psyche, knowing death was near, was preparing for a transformation, not an ending, a return. Jung documented this in his book, Memories, Dreams, Reflections. He wrote about patients who, in their final weeks, stopped fearing death, not because they found religion, but because their unconscious showed them something, a vision, a knowing, that the small self, the one they had been defending their entire lives, was just a temporary structure, and beneath it, waiting, was something that had always been there, something that did not die. Jung called it the self with a capital S, the eternal core of consciousness, the part of you that exists before birth and continues after death. And his final discovery was this: most people never meet it. They live their entire lives identified with the ego, the small self, the one that is terrified of disappearing. But those who do the inner work, those who go through what Jung called individuation, the process of integrating the unconscious, they meet the self while they are still alive. And when they do, death stops being a threat, because they realize the part of them that was always afraid of dying was never real to begin with. It was just a mask, a role, a temporary structure the psyche built to navigate the world, but it was never who they actually were. Jung's final message was not about life after death. It was about waking up to what you are before death comes. Because if you wait until the end, you will have spent your entire existence defending something that was always meant to dissolve. the ego, the small self, the I that thinks it is in control, and you will have missed the one thing that actually matters, meeting the self, the eternal part of you, the part that was here before you were born and will remain long after your body turns to dust. Jung discovered something strange in the dreams of dying patients, a pattern that repeated itself so consistently he could predict when someone was within months of death just by analyzing their dreams. He called it the death preparation process, and it had 4 stages. Stage 1, the person begins dreaming about journeys, long roads, distant lands, crossing rivers, climbing mountains. The unconscious, Jung realized, was preparing them for a transition, not telling them they were dying, showing them symbolically that something was ending and something else was beginning. Stage 2, the dreams shift. Animals appear, wise old figures, guides. Jung called these archetypes, universal symbols that exist in every culture: the wise old man, the great mother, the shadow. And when these figures began appearing in someone's dreams repeatedly, night after night, Jung knew they were being guided, not by their conscious mind, but by something deeper, the self, preparing them for what comes next. Stage 3, the dreams become luminous, filled with light, golden fields, glowing cities, radiant figures. Patients would wake up and describe these dreams with tears in their eyes, not because they were sad, but because the dreams felt more real than waking life. Jung wrote, "It is as if the unconscious is showing them their true home, the place they came from, the place they are returning to." And stage 4, the final stage, was the most profound. The person stops dreaming about themselves, their individual identity fades, and they begin dreaming in symbols of unity, circles, mandalas, spirals. The self, fully emerged, no longer separate, no longer alone, but connected to something infinite. Jung said, "In these final dreams, the ego dissolves, and what remains is pure consciousness, no longer personal, but universal." This was not imagination, this was data. Jung documented this process in hundreds of patients across different cultures, different religions, different belief systems, and the pattern was always the same. The psyche, as death approached, began dismantling the ego piece by piece and revealing what had always been underneath: the self, eternal, unchanging, waiting. But here is what shook Jung to his core. This process, this death preparation, did not only happen to the dying, it happened to anyone who went deep enough into their own unconscious, through meditation, through analysis, through what Jung called active imagination. People who had never been close to death began having the same dreams, the same symbols, the same journey. And Jung realized this is not about dying, this is about awakening. The psyche does not wait for death to show you the self. It tries to show you your entire life, through dreams, through symbols, through moments of synchronicity that stop you in your tracks and make you ask, what is really happening here? But most people ignore it. They dismiss the dreams, they explain away the symbols, they live their entire lives on the surface, and they never realize the thing they are most afraid of losing, the ego, the small self, was never real to begin with. Jung's final message was this: you do not have to wait for death to meet the self. You can meet it now, while you are still alive, while there is still time to live from that place. And when you do, everything changes. Not because life becomes easier, but because you finally understand what you are. In his last interview, just weeks before his death, Jung was asked a simple question: "What do you think happens when we die?" He paused, looked out the window, and said something that left the interviewer speechless. "I do not think, I have seen." The interviewer pressed him. "Seen what?" Jung smiled and said that consciousness is not produced by the brain is produced by consciousness. This was not philosophy. This was the conclusion of a man who had spent his entire life studying the mind. And what he realized in those final weeks was this: we have it backwards. We think we are bodies with consciousness inside. But Jung discovered the opposite. We are consciousness, temporarily wearing a body. And when the body dies, consciousness does not end. It simply returns. Jung studied near-death experiences long before they became popular. He interviewed patients who had been declared clinically dead and came back, and every single one described the same thing: a light, a sense of peace, and the feeling, unmistakable, that they were returning home, not going somewhere new, returning as if they had been there before. Jung wrote in his private journals, "The unconscious knows, it remembers. What we call birth is actually forgetting, and what we call death is remembering." Think about that. What if you are not learning who you are, but remembering? What if the self, the eternal part of you, has always known, and this entire life, every struggle, every question, every moment of confusion is just the process of waking back up? Jung believed that the ego is necessary for survival, for navigating the world, for building a life, but it was never meant to be permanent. It was meant to be a stage, a childhood, and individuation, the process of integrating the unconscious, is the maturation, the moment when you stop identifying with the small self and recognize what you have always been, the self, infinite, eternal, whole. But here is the tragedy. Most people never make that shift. They spend their entire lives defending the ego, building it up, protecting it, terrified of anything that threatens it. And then, at the very end, when death comes, the ego dissolves anyway, and they finally see, too late to live from it, too late to embody it, too late to do anything except let go. Jung's final message was urgent, not because he feared death, but because he saw what most people miss, the opportunity to wake up before it is over, to meet the self while you still have time, to stop defending the mask and start living as what you actually are. He said, "The greatest tragedy is not death, it is living your entire life as someone you are not." And in his final days, Jung was not afraid, because he had done the work, he had met the self. He knew with absolute certainty that the part of him that mattered would not die, could not die, because it had never been born. It was eternal, and it was waiting patiently for the temporary structure called Carl Jung to finally dissolve, so the self could return to where it had always been.
So what does this mean for you? Right now, today, while you are still alive? Jung's final discovery was not just about death. It was an instruction, a map for how to live. He said, "The self cannot be found by looking outward. It reveals itself only when you turn inward." And the process, the one Jung called individuation, is not complicated. It is simply this. Stop running from yourself. Stop hiding behind roles. Stop pretending you are the mask you wear for the world. And start asking the one question most people avoid their entire lives. Who am I when no one is watching? Not who you think you should be. Not who your parents wanted. Not who society expects. But who you actually are, beneath all of that. Jung said that most people are terrified of this question because answering it means facing the shadow, the parts of yourself you have rejected, the emotions you buried, the desires you denied, the truth you have been running from. But here is what Jung discovered. The shadow is not your enemy. It is the doorway to the self. Because you cannot become whole by only accepting the parts of yourself you like. You become whole by integrating everything, the light and the dark, the strength and the weakness, the beauty and the ugliness, all of it. And when you do, when you stop rejecting yourself, something shifts. The ego, the small, frightened self, begins to relax because it no longer has to defend anything. And beneath it, the self emerges, calm, certain, unshakable. Jung said that people who meet the self while they are still alive live differently. Not better, differently. They stop chasing validation because they no longer need it. They stop fearing death because they know what they are. They stop defending their identity because they realized it was never real to begin with. And they start living not from fear, but from presence, not from lack, but from fullness, not from ego, but from self. This is what Jung meant when he said, "I do not believe, I know." He was not talking about belief in God. He was talking about knowing the self, the eternal consciousness that does not die. And once you know it, once you meet it, everything changes. Not because life becomes easier, but because you finally understand what this is all for. Jung spent 85 years preparing for one moment, the moment when the ego dissolved and the self remained. And when that moment came, on June 6, 1961, he was ready. Not because he believed something, but because he knew. And his final message to you, to anyone still alive, still searching, is this: do not wait. Do not spend your entire life defending a self that was never real. Turn inward, face the shadow, integrate the unconscious, and meet the part of you that has been waiting your entire life to finally be seen. Because when you do, you will realize what Jung realized. You are not a body with a soul. You are a soul who happens to have a body. And when the body falls away, you do not disappear. You return to what you have always been: eternal, whole, free.
So what does this mean for you, right now, today, while you are still alive? Jung's final discovery was not just about death. It was an instruction, a map for how to live. He said, "The self cannot be found by looking outward. It reveals itself only when you turn inward." And the process, the one Jung called individuation, is not complicated. It is simply this: stop running from yourself.
Stop hiding behind roles. Stop pretending you are the mask you wear for the world, and start asking the one question most people avoid their entire lives. Who am I when no one is watching? Not who you think you should be, not who your parents wanted, not who society expects, but who you actually are beneath all of that. Jung said that most people are terrified of this question because answering it means facing the shadow, the parts of yourself you have rejected, the emotions you buried, the desires you denied, the truth you have been running from. But here is what Jung discovered. The shadow is not your enemy. It is the doorway to the self. Because you cannot become whole by only accepting the parts of yourself you like. You become whole by integrating everything, the light and the dark, the strength and the weakness, the beauty and the ugliness, all of it. And when you do, when you stop rejecting yourself, something shifts. The ego, the small, frightened self, begins to relax, because it no longer has to defend anything, and beneath it the self emerges, calm, certain, unshakable. Jung worked with a patient once, a man in his 50s who came to therapy because he felt empty. He had everything society told him to want: a successful career, a family, money, respect, but inside he felt hollow. Jung asked him one question: when was the last time you did something not because you should, but because it was true? The man could not answer. He realized he had spent his entire life performing, playing roles, being who others expected, and he had no idea who he actually was. Jung gave him one task: sit in silence every day for 30 minutes. No distractions, no agenda, just sit and listen. The man resisted at first. He said it felt pointless, uncomfortable, but Jung insisted. The self will not speak until you create space for it. So the man did it. And after 3 months, something happened. He began having dreams, vivid, symbolic, images he could not explain. Jung helped him decode them, and slowly, piece by piece, the man began meeting himself. Not the version he had been performing, but the real self, the one buried beneath decades of conditioning. And once he met it, his life did not change externally. He kept the same job, the same family, the same routine. But internally, everything shifted. He stopped living from obligation and started living from alignment. He stopped fearing judgment because he finally knew who he was, and no one, no outside opinion could shake that. This is what Jung meant by individuation. It is not about becoming someone new. It is about stripping away everything that is not you, until only the self remains.
Jung said there are signs that the self is calling you. Not everyone hears it, not everyone is ready. But if you recognize these signs in your own life, it means your psyche is preparing you for the shift from ego to self. Sign 1. You feel disconnected from the life you built. The things that once motivated you no longer matter. The achievements that once gave you pride feel empty. You look around at your life and you feel like a stranger in it. This is not depression. This is the ego beginning to crack. Jung called this the dark night of the soul, the moment when the old self, the one you built to survive, starts to dissolve, and it feels like death. But it is not death, it is preparation for rebirth. Sign 2. Your dreams become intense, symbolic, strange. You wake up and feel like you have been somewhere else, somewhere deeper. Jung said that when the self begins to emerge, the unconscious speaks louder, through dreams, through synchronicities, through moments that feel too meaningful to be random. If this is happening to you, pay attention. Your psyche is trying to show you something the conscious mind cannot see. Sign 3. You crave solitude, not because you hate people, but because you need space. Space to think, space to feel, space to hear yourself. Jung said, loneliness is the price of individuation, because as you move toward the self, you naturally move away from the crowd. Not forever, but temporarily, to do the inner work that cannot be done in the noise. Sign 4. You start questioning everything, your beliefs, your values, your identity. Things you once accepted without thought suddenly feel false. This is not confusion, this is clarity beginning. Jung said that the self cannot emerge until the ego is questioned, and questioning is the first step toward transformation. And sign 5, the most important, you feel a pull, a calling towards something you cannot name. You do not know what it is, but you know it is real, and you know ignoring it would be a betrayal of yourself. Jung said this is the self reaching out, inviting you to stop living on the surface and start living from depth. And when you feel this, you have two choices. You can ignore it, push it down, go back to sleep, and spend the rest of your life wondering what if. Or you can answer it, turn inward, face what you have been avoiding, and meet the part of you that has been waiting your entire life to finally be recognized. Jung chose the second path, and it cost him everything: his relationships, his reputation, his comfort. But it gave him something no one could take away: the knowing that he was not his ego, he was not his body, he was the self, eternal, unshakable, real. And in his final breath, he did not fear, because he knew what he was and where he was going. So here is what Carl Jung left behind. Not a theory, not a belief, but a path. A way to live that most people never discover. He said, "Your vision will become clear only when you look into your heart. Who looks outside dreams, who looks inside awakens." And his final message, the one he spent his last weeks trying to communicate, was this: do not wait for death to meet yourself. Do not spend your entire life defending a version of you that was never real. Turn inward, now, while there is still time. Face the shadow, integrate the unconscious, and meet the self, the eternal part of you, the part that was here before you were born and will remain long after your body turns to dust. Jung died on June 6, 1961, but the self he discovered did not die, because it never could. And the question he left for you, for anyone watching this, is simple. Will you wait until the end to realize what you are, or will you start the journey now? The journey inward, toward the only thing that has ever been real. Not the roles you play, not the image you protect, but the self, waiting, patient, eternal. If this message reached you at this exact moment, it is not random. Jung believed that synchronicity, meaningful coincidence, is the way the unconscious speaks. And if you are here right now listening to this, it means something in you is ready. Ready to stop running, ready to stop pretending, ready to meet what you have been avoiding your entire life, yourself. Jung's final words, whispered to a close friend just days before he died, were these: "Let everything happen to you, beauty and terror. Just keep going. No feeling is final." He was not talking about external life. He was talking about the inner journey, the one that leads you through the shadow, through the fear, through the dissolution of everything you thought you were, to the self. And once you arrive, you realize you were never lost. You were always here. You just forgot. And this entire life, every struggle, every question, every moment of confusion, was just the process of remembering. If you want to go deeper into Jung's psychology, into the journey of individuation, subscribe to this channel, because this is just the beginning. And if this message made you feel something, made you see something you have been avoiding, leave one word in the comments: awake, ready, remembering, beginning, here. Whatever feels true, your word matters because it marks the moment when you stopped running and started walking toward yourself. Thank you for being here. Jung would have wanted you to know you are not alone. The self has been waiting for you your entire life.